Hello, Lewes. In my mind, I still have a lot of red hair. Still. When I finished this book, the day I stopped editing, I was knackered and I went out for a walk. And I happened to walk past Air Lindhouse Studios, which is George Martin's place. And an old friend of mine, Phil Todd, a sax player, was walking in. And we hadn't seen each other for a long time. We had a chat. And I said, I've just finished a book. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And it took 2 years. And he said, what, to read one? Now that was brilliant. That to me is musician's humour. Love it. Think differently. And I managed to group a couple of ideas together. Because the humour is sardonic, surreal, absurd. There was a bass player called Steve Stroud, who was with Cliff at the time. I happened to meet him in a music shop. And just out of interest, I said, hi Steve, what strings do you use? He said, I'll try to use all 4 of them. And I since found out from Guy Pratt, there's a bass player called Douglas Hart, who works in a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain. And he's known for having only 2 strings. And someone once asked him, why 2 strings? And he looked incredulous and said, well, in case one breaks. Some musicians are great observers. The late Graham Jarvis, dear friend, lovely drummer, he was working with the Everly Brothers on tour. And it was a good band, Pink Panther on piano and Albert Lee on guitar. And Graham noticed that the brothers were very different, that Phil was a chain smoker, ciggies all the time, and Don liked a few glasses of red wine. So Graham, with a brilliant vision of things, he nicknamed them Smoke Heavily and Drink Heavily. And then musicians have to survive. We have to survive the insanity of this daft world we inhabit. And there's a percussionist in town in London called Gary Cattell. He's one of the top guys, plays with classical orchestras, plays jazz, plays in films. Good man. And one day, he was playing with a Nash ensemble at Queen Elizabeth Hall. And he just finished a concert. And he went back to the green room just to relax. And this woman came in, all dressed up, very smart, and said to him, what do you do? Now this is absurd, she'd just been watching him for 2 hours playing percussion on stage. And he said, well, I'm a musician, I play percussion. And in her world, in her mentality, you had to have a real job. That's not a real job. And he could see this happening. He could see it was going to go nowhere, so he just changed tack and said, look, what does your husband do? And she's all proud, and she said, oh, he's in oil. And Gary says, what is he, a fucking sardine? And Gary. Another good friend of mine is Clem Gattini, a drummer, who's in his mid-70s now, but he started his career, he played drums on Shaking All Over in 1960. And he became one of the top session drummers. He played on 42 #1 records. And he said later, if I'd known it was going to be as important as this, I'd have played better. Which is great. But Clem, I spoke to Clem recently. This is survival again. He'd gone to play in a cancer charity at Birmingham Town Hall. A notoriously hard place to get to and park and find. And he's very nearby, and he's on the phone to the organisers, trying to find out where to go. And a policeman knocks on my window, tells him to move. And Clem says, look, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to... And the policeman interrupts him, won't let him speak or get on the phone or whatever. And Clem gets heated. I said, for Christ's sake, look, And the policeman said, any more of this and I should charge you for swearing. And Clem is very creative. He said, can you charge me for thinking? And the policeman said, well, no, sir. And Clem said, well, I think you're an arsehole. Clem actually went to court to defend himself. He got off only because the guy hadn't cautioned him. It's a great pity because Clem wanted the guy to read that out. One final musician survival story. Ronnie Asprey was a lovely saxophone player, lived near Brighton at the time, and he was trying to get home about 5 o'clock, driving down Park Lane, rush hour. Now this is madness, trying to go down that road at that time. And the idiot moved into the bus lane, thinking he might help. Well, of course, no chance, he's boxed in within seconds. And he stationed me right next to a policeman standing on the pavement. He comes over, the window, Ronnie winds it down. And this policeman's got the Hendon Charm School humour. He says, is this a bus, sir? Ronnie sort of looked at him and said, you're new on traffic, aren't you? There'll be some pictures soon. A little bit of history, but this is skiffle. We all started with skiffle in this country. I just want to read one little bit from Roger Glover, who became the bass player of Deep Purple. He said, in 1955, I was living above a pub, and my parents started getting skiffle bands to play in the saloon bar. Picture me one night in pyjamas, wondering what the sound was, creeping down the stairs, inching open the door that led to the bar, and finding myself almost in amongst a skiffle band as they played. Revelation, live music. There would be about 5 or 6 of them, several guitarists, a banjo, ukulele, percussionist. I can do this now. Percussionist with all kinds of bells, cymbals, hooters and whistles attached, and a bass player using a teacher's bass. There was a furious strumming, banging, thumping, a lot of hollering, followed by applause. Then we start all over again. And that was quite a lovely introduction to that music. We had the kind of founding fathers here was Lonnie Donegan, who his big hit was Rock On and Line. I think he was paid £7 for that because he was a session man with Chris Barber. Never got a royalty. It's a massive million seller and £7. I also had Chas McDevitt with Nancy Whiskey on vocals. They had Freight Train with the inimitable whistling from Chas. See if you can guess who this is. Third from the right. Anybody guess who that is? Yeah, yeah. Tony from the Hollies. With 3,000 guitars and a lovely teacher's bass, beautiful work of art that. So there he was, that's Tony. And also the Quarrymen, you'll know, that's their version of skiffle at the time, when Paul met John. Hank and Bruce started in a skiffle band called the Railroaders up in Newcastle, way before they were the Shadows. And look at Hank playing the Hoffman Congress, beautiful. Yeah. Bruce was passionate about the music, and he said the queue for ages at the side door of the Newcastle Empire to catch a glimpse of the king of skiffle, Lonnie. He said, I nervously handed in my autograph book, and he spoke to me. Even now I can remember my hero's words like it was yesterday. Fuck off, son, I'm in a hurry. I think he was choked, Bruce Williams. But he didn't realise how long he had to get the night train back to London. There's a lovely journalist who sadly died a year or two ago called Miles Kington. And he wrote, I did a radio broadcast with him, and he said in this programme, the early rock stars grappled with the fact that nobody had the faintest idea of how to go about becoming a rock star because nobody had ever done it before. And that's why it's so strange. There were no templates. You just had to find your own way. And with my friends at school, we started a band. We didn't know what we were doing. The initial lineup was acoustic guitar, a snare drum that was made out of a tenor banjo frame with cardboard stripped across. And I played discount recorder. You know, it's real rock and roll. This was a slightly later version of the same band, the Peasants. There's the vision on the left is me. The pickup was 2 earphones and a soap dish, and it was plugged into a 2-watt tape recorder. The lead guitar player, his speaker was on the right, sellotaped to a chair. And I think the vase of flowers was part of my sound. We got a gig. Someone booked us for a barbecue. This is a little village in Staffordshire. Someone booked us for a barbecue in a field, in a farmer's field. And we set up on this trailer, this 4-wheel trailer, in a dreadful lineup of, I don't know, 3 guitars, horrible drum kit, and whatever, descant recorder. And we started playing, and someone brought a tractor and towed us away while we were playing. It was such an indignity. The ultimate opinion. And our material was strange. We were all learning from each other. There were no rules. And we were influenced by the Goon Show as well. So we do a version of Living Doll that was part skiffle, part Goon Show. It's surreal. What's here? One of the reasons that English records sounded so bloody awful was that we couldn't get American guitars or American instruments because there was a trade embargo on American goods until 1960, a post-war thing. So you could go to a shop and buy Framus, Rossetti, all kinds of hideous things, Hoffners, but no Fenders, no Gibsons, nothing like that. And we look at records like this, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and he's holding this thing in his hands. We thought it was a spaceship. We had no idea it was a guitar, Fender Stratocaster. It looked otherworldly, absolutely unavailable, unattainable. And you can see, here's a very good picture of the Drifters, Cliff and the Drifters, before they became the Shadows. Jed's playing Framus, Hanks and Antoria. Bruce is playing Grimshaw, I think it is. All of them horrible. They had terrible actions and a terrible sound. But that's how it was. Nobody could get these American instruments. The various importers used to buy things from all over Europe, and even from Russia. Terrible Russian guitars that were paid for not with money but with razor blades. Vic Flick, who was one of the founding 7 guitar players here, playing the John Berry 7, he found out that a tank commander's throat mic used to fit here on the neck. If you plugged that into your radio and fitted it on the guitar, you get a sound. It's great. So I did that, so it was lovely, it worked. There's a bass player called Andy Pyle, who played with a lot of bands. He's in Pete Frame's book on almost every page. We all had friends at school who made things, the boffins. And this guy made for Andy, he converted a radio into a guitar amp, but he soldered the lead into it. It was only that long. So that if the amp was on the floor, Andy had to play like this. He said if the amp was on the chair behind him, it was rendered inaudible if more than 2 people were speaking at once. I found out that my parents' radio, which is a big Murphy, 1952, had a 10-inch speaker in it and an input socket marked gram for gramophone. If you plug the instrument of that, it sounded great. So that for a few months, that was my bass amp. Though it didn't leave the living room. I couldn't gig with it. It was too polished. There's a picture of my later band, the Treatments. There's the radio behind me. I'm sitting down. The equipment is getting better, but it's still dreadful, as you can see. And there was a fifth member, but for some reason he got photoshopped out. But the guy did the photoshopping, accidentally left his foot behind on the right there. So poor musicians in a foot. There was a lot of people making things, and Phil Palmer, guitar player, you may have heard of him. He's a sideman who's toured with Dire Straits and Eric Clapton. That's Phil on the left. He built that. He's age 15. He built that flying V out of a mahogany wardrobe. He said it weighed a ton, and you trembled his back. And he also commented that the audience was on its foot. This guy is Pete Wilshire. He became a really good pedal steel player, and he started out playing lap steel made out of his mum's ironing board. It's brilliant, isn't it? Pragmatic. And Adrian Legg, who became a terrific country acoustic guitar player, very well known in America now. He used to build things. He built this out of some scrap wood. He said anything he could find, he'd built guitars out of. John Etheridge, who's a great jazz guitar player now, he and his brother built what he called an acoustic Strat. It's a beautiful piece of work, polished and looked great. He said the trouble was when he fitted the strings, it bent to a right angle. Poor bugger, never used it. Now, recognise that face? Yes. Gary Moore, the late Gary Moore. Dear man, what great knees. And that's in about age 7, I think, in Ireland. He went on to better things. Now the best man of all to build a guitar was Brian May. He and his dad built that. The bulk of it was out of an 18th century fireplace. And the treble system was a steel knife edge with 2 motorbike valve springs to counter the string tension, which is brilliant. The arm was from a bicycle saddlebag holder with his mum's plastic knitting needle on the tip. So, fantastic, isn't it? What an achievement. And he still plays it still sounds great. Dads were great, dads were important. And my dad helped me build this. This is 1962. I wanted to copy friends' records without buying them, so they went straight to tape. And this machine I used later to record gigs, and some have come out on CD. Amazing. But dads were great. They knew about carpentry. The sort of Bible, the electronic Bible of the day was Practical Wireless. I used to build lots of circuits out of this. And the companion magazine was Practical Householder. This is from 1955. You can see it's post-war. Build your own refrigerator. You wouldn't see that in America. And I looked through this magazine. There was an article on chromium plating at home. What? Government safety. I was looking through the advert pages, and there was an advert for Ringo legs. It said, "Convert your spare wood into elegant furniture." Well, in fact, they became useful because we noticed that the shadows inside them, their Fox 30s were on big, lovely steel tube frames. Well, we couldn't afford that. We could afford Branco legs. So all our amps went up on little wobbly legs. I must have a drink, excuse me. Sorry it's so cold. Can you hear this all right, by the way? Is that okay? Little bit of auditions. I'm sure we've all done it. Most of us have. Rick Parfitt from Status Quo. That is Rick Parfitt. With his Martin Colletti dwarfing him. And his mum was very keen for him to get a career. And she took him to see the A&R man Marcel Stellman at Decca. Marcel Stellman had another career. He was a producer of the Goons. He actually produced the Eton song. He had a problem getting that together because he wanted to have all three Goons together, but Harry Seacombe already had a contract with Phillips as a singer, a tenor. So they had to have a negotiation with Johnny Francis of Phillips, and they arrived at a contract such that all three Goons could perform together, but the contract said Peter and Spike could sing, but Harry could only shout and blow raspberries. What a contract. Anyways, that's Marcel Stellman, and he was the A&R man. And Rick did his little performance for him. Now, as you can imagine, it wasn't that good. And Marcel Stellman had to be diplomatic to his mum. And he said, bringing back his breathing's better. Which supposed means fuck all. So, Rick Parfitt went home. I used to practice. You go, baby face. Look where it got him, eh? My dear friend Ray Russell, age 15. This is Ray as a young man, age 12, having a great time on ukulele. Edmonton, I think it was Edmonton. Yeah. Look at that, I'm so happy. Age 15, he tried to get a gig with the Eric Laney band, and the rehearsal room where it was occurring had the three wooden steps down to it. And he's carrying an amber guitar, and he stumbled and knocked the heel off one of his boots, his Mexican boots, which reveals a synth spike, which embedded itself permanently in one step. So he's stuck. Too frightened to tell them about this. He found a socket, set up the amp here, and plugged in. And in this strange dramatic pose, with one leg stuck in his... did the audition from the stair. Did you get the gig, man? No. My school band, Trade Winds, we got a little bit better, but we lost our singers. And this is us in Wolverhampton Civic Hall, in fact. There's the wobbly legs on the amplifiers. Everything wobbled. A drummer with two snare drums, very visionary. Yeah. We needed a new singer, and we found this local guy called Neil. I've no idea what his other name was. And he came round my house, and normally when you have an audition, you should do, say, 3 songs, don't you, to find out what the singer's like. Well, for some reason, we only did one song, the Banana Boat song, for Christ's sake. I still don't know. And I thought he was great. So we did this gig, and the next gig we had lined up was Wolverhampton Gold, which is a Saturday morning kids' TV thing, like a teenage show. 2,000 people. 2,000 teenagers, can you imagine? So we turned up. Now, poor Neil, I didn't realise how terrified he was. This was his first gig. And he was allotted 3 songs in our set. And he came on, his throat, all his saliva disappeared, and his tongue was sticking to the top of his mouth. And every song was far too high for him to sing. So one of the songs we did was How Do You Do It, Jerry the bass player goes, how do you do? He was singing How Do You yodeling. It was horrific. But he ploughed on, did all 3 songs, and walked off. And you'd expect a little ripple of some kind. Nothing. Absolute silence. Just a murmur of 2,000 very bored teenagers. And then had a voice from the very back of the stalls yelling in this wonderful Midland accent. I'll try and impersonate. You heard, it's about time you're fucked off. Critics. We tried to go electric. Nobody knew anything about electric guitars. And as evidenced by people like Mike Rutherford, who became the guitar player in Genesis. When he was 10, he went with his mum to a shop in Manchester to get a guitar, and he bought his electric guitar. And as he was leaving, the shopkeeper said, "What amplifier do you want?" And Mike said, "Oh no, I don't want an amp." Because in that period, there was a kind of feeling that either electric guitars played themselves, or you plugged them in the wall. We didn't have amps. This was a very common kind of perception. It wasn't unusual. And Francis Rossi, who went on to Status Quo, he got his guitar, opened it up, there's a jack cable there, jack to jack. He thought, that's wrong. Stripped off one of the plugs and fitted a 13-amp plug on it. That's it. He thought nothing was happening. He thought perhaps it needs time to warm up. I don't know why he didn't kill himself. So the fight was on for these instruments. There's Francis a bit later. This is Cliff and the Drifters, still with their strange instruments. Hank has now got his Strat, using only Vox 1815, so you can imagine how quiet that was. And no microphone, the only mic in the building is for the singers. And Cliff had imported the Stratocaster from America. You couldn't buy them, but you did a private import. And it arrived at their flat in Marylebone High Street. And they said they opened up the case, and there's that smell of crushed velvet from a Fender case. And it was red and it had gold bits. It was like an object of great worship. And they didn't pick it up, they just looked at it for a long time and smelt it. So that's Hank Strat. And still the same lineup. They had to do pantomime. This is then at Stockton. It's amazing. I asked Bruce Welch on the left. I said, he's looking so intently at his left hand. I said, "What were you thinking?" He said, "I was trying to decide which of the 4 chords I know is the correct one." And that was the album cover. Everybody from that period just worshipped this. It was a revelation of the new sound, the Shadows. Quite fantastic. And they recorded Apache in Abbey Road, Abbey Studio 2, that's the Studio 2. Jet Harris telling me, and Norrie Paramore, the producer, and Bruce and Hank, and Cliff's on acoustic guitar. I don't have no idea what song that was. Oh, I'm shivering. You all right there? I'm doing it for my art. This is Hank's. I went to Bruce's house to photograph Hank's actual Strat, which is on the cover of my book. That's a close-up of the tremolo arm. You can see where Hank's sweaty palm used to hold the tremolo. That's it. All those years. There's an EP that I bought in 1961, and the young guitar player then, who was about 10 years younger than me, called Mitch Dalton. He was a huge fan of Hank. He loved the sound, didn't know how he got it, and he saw this EP and bought it and read the sleeve notes, and it said Bruce Welch rhythm guitar, Jet Harris bass guitar, Tony Meehan drums, and Hank Marvin lead guitar. There's the trick, it's been a lead. Sheet music was a bit of a problem. Things were always in the wrong keys. They were transcribed by saxophone players, never in guitar players' keys. Smoke on the Water in A flat, and Danger in F, horrible things. And you have ukulele chord boxes. Do you need it? Oh, I thought it should go. Bring it forward. My James Brown moment. Hugh Burns. Have a picture of Hugh here? Yes. Guy on the left, his young band in Scotland. Hugh went on to be a great session player. He played the lead breaks on Baker Street, that kind of thing. Played George Michael, they loved stuff. But his band in Scotland, they're looking at a piece of music one day and they came across the chord G-sus, which some of you may know. Well, they didn't know what it was. They had a discussion. What does it mean? Does it mean sustained or suspended? The drummer suggested it stood for suspect, which means you don't play it if you don't want to. Now, this is a shot of Abbey Road Studio 2 from where I sat once. This is 1973, that's the famous Stairway, the Beatles used to walk up. And I was booked in a 50-piece orchestra to play with this composer called David Rose. He was very well known for writing Stripper, for example, the Bonanza theme. And I really couldn't read very well in those days. I could bluff very well. I could read chords and I could interpret for this to everybody else and figure out what I should be playing. But this was a reading gig. I'm suddenly out of my depth. And we're doing an album very quickly. Halfway through one session, David Rose, the MD, looks at me and says, "Mr. Bass Player, would you please play bars 59 to 73, Lord?" So the whole orchestra turns and look. 50 eyes are on me, and I can't read it. Crapped myself and played something. And he said, "Well, it's not what I wrote, but it'll do." Kind man, so I learned to read after that. There's a guitar player, another one of the session guys called Paul Keogh. He's a lovely, lovely player from Dublin. And sometimes after doing a session, you sometimes get called to do a live concert or a gig or whatever. One day we got a call to do a concert at the Mermaid Theatre just on the river to back a Romanian singer called Magdalena Woznia, who sang in the style of Edith Piaf. Do you know the French chanteuse in that style? And I think it's a nice gig. We went for a rehearsal in the afternoon. And then it just hit us, the madness of this. There were 20 songs to learn in 3 hours. Each song was 6 sheets long. So imagine 6 sheets sellotape together, that wide. You know it's going to go wrong. Had to. And she wasn't very equipped at microphones. There was a solitary mic like this, and she's enthusing about the songs, about Piaf, the chanteuse tradition, the wounds of love. She's walking up down, but try and imagine I'm walking past, that's right, you hear Piaf. So the announcement was useless. So that starts us off. And we're also sitting in a stage play. There's a stage play going on. We just commandeered for the night. I'm sitting in a fireplace. It's insane, surreal. So we start to get the giggles, which you mustn't. It's a silent theatre. It's very reverential. The drummer, I've forgotten his name. He was Dudley Moore's drummer. Chris Carron was the Dudley Moore's drummer at the time. He dozed off, the poor bugger, and he went like this and let go of his sticks. So in this silence, there's this awful sound of 2 sticks bouncing across the stage. In the middle of this struggle not to laugh, I lost my place, and I'm searching the part for a clue. Completely lost. And the best thing to do is not play, because you'll just play wrong notes. But next to me is Paul Keogh, this Irish guitar player. And he's staring at his part very intently, doing a tremolando very fast. It looks like he really knows what's going on. So I did the sideways whispers. "Hey, Paul, where are we?" And he didn't look up. He kept staring at his part and kept playing and whispered back at me. And he said, "Fuck knows." Honest. Bit on clubs, nightclubs. Somebody told me this lovely story about Pontins. I don't know which town it is in. Is it Bournemouth? Or the Pontins? I don't know. And they had a resident band there called Ted Hiscock and his band. And the chief bluecoat would have to announce what the evening was going to be, the evening's procedure to the audience. And one night he was taken very suddenly ill in a very novice blue coat and was told he's got to go and do this announcement. Well, he was terrified. He finally agreed to do it as long as he could have a script for this. So he goes along and, the shaking hands, he's reading this thing. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a few pleasures, some dancing girls, some jugglers, the whole list of nonsense. And he said, finally, for your dancing pleasure, we have Ted, his cock, and his bed. Now, I've got to explain something about the band I was in called, in the mid-70s, I was doing a session. We did a version of Wild Thing. It wasn't very good, but it became a hit in America. It actually got in the top 20. So we formed a band around it, became this band and toured the States. So it was good fun, just for a while. And this is the band. There's the end, is it? Ironically, that's in Oklahoma, sadly. But one night, we were playing in Las Vegas, and done our gig, and we went to a nightclub afterwards. And we're just sitting there, standing around, having a beer, and we saw this girl who looked fine, but she was acting a bit annoyingly. Every time someone came up to her to ask her if she wanted a drink or a dance or anything, she rebuffed them in a very unpleasant way, so it was very hurtful. And we didn't like this. And slowly a plan was hatched. And the guitar player, Ray, on the right, and one of our row crew, Nick, very slowly moved towards her, imperceptibly, just sidling along the bar. Now, Nick had one of these big watches on that's got about 10 dials, it's got the faces of the moon and that kind of thing. And as we were right next to her, he goes like this. And Ray Fennick, the guitar player, said, excuse me, have you just farted? My friend here has a photometer. We're getting a very high reading in his head. But that was it. She couldn't handle it. She'd never ever been treated like this in her life. She just left. It was fantastic. It was good to see. And we moved, the band went to, we played at the Whiskey in Los Angeles. And we thought we needed a support act, but we hadn't got one. Now, I happened to have a tape with me I brought from London. It was the very early Pete Dunn tape when they were very drunk. It later got known as Derek and Clive. I don't know if anyone's ever heard this. Imagine Peter Cook and more pissed out their minds, improvising, and being appalling. The language is disgusting, just a litany of swear words. And I said, why don't we use that tape as our opening act? Ray did. Fine. So that was the plan. The sound man was baffled, but that's what we did. What we didn't know was that, meanwhile, our manager, Mike Hurst, had checked into the Beverly Welsh show just up the road, and he'd come down to the bar and met the English actor Donald Pleasance. They chatted, and Mike said to him, look, I've got my new band opening at the Whiskey. Why don't you come down to the opening night? He knew nothing of ours, of the opening act. So they come down. Thank God we didn't know they were there. I think we'd have died if we realised. But so up in the galleries, Mike Hurst and Donald Pleasance, and the show starts, and it's like, you fucking can't, it's awful. And Mike's under the table with fringing embarrassment. And Donald Pleasance said to him, is it always like this? A couple of years before that, I went to the States with Michael Darbo, who used to be the singer of the Manfred Band. And we played this club called the Bitter End in New York. And we were supporting John Prine this time. John Prine is an American singer that's a bit like Bob Dylan. He was a friend of Dylan. And we kept wondering if Bob might come down the show. We never saw him. But one afternoon, I went in to check my shirts or something. And I went to this little tinny anteroom. And in the corner was this short figure in denims with grey bands and denim hat. I went, oh, hi, and then began doing my shirts. And I must have frozen, and I suddenly thought, oh shit, I'm in a room with Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
What do you say? What do you say? He's just done Blonde on Blonde. And I just see that Pennebaker film where he's very caustic, very abrasive to everybody. I didn't want to come across as an arsehole, so I began composing this fantastic opening statement full of subclauses. It was brilliant. Just got it right, and he felt off. So that was my non-meeting of Bob Dylan. I'm completely losing track of time here. Am I all right? Yeah. Everything okay? Yeah. My first proper band in London was a band called Affinity. We had 4 players and a girl singer called Linda Hall. Our first gig, one of them, was at Ray Scott's, and he in fact became our manager. And that was our gig at the club with the Stan Getz Quartet. It was amazing to spend a month there. Such an illustrious company. It's fantastic. Ronnie, the man, he was a hero. He was just brilliant. Lovely player. Very clever man to put the club together in the first place. But a hysterical man. He was very witty, very dry humour, very laconic, very abrasive when necessary. I'll read a couple of his statements. You'd hear this every night during the show. I can't do his delivery, I'm afraid. I'll just read it out here. He said, this is in the middle of the evening. He said, I love this club. It reminds me of home. It's filthy and full of strangers. Last night, vandals broke in and redecorated. Do you know, he's apologised that the toilet attendant has had to resign. He just couldn't stand the smell of the kitchen. He welcomed a guy. He said, it's a great pleasure to introduce a young man who's just finished cabaret in the north, and now he's now here to finish it in the south. And he said, I had Miles Davis in the club last week. Lovely man. He took me to one side and left me there. But I was in his office one day, it's this room at the back of the club. He was always watching television, always watching horse racing. He was passionate, and he's always putting bets on it, but he was useless. Never won. And he said, I could stop a runaway horse just by putting money on it. He used to answer the phone if someone rang in to make a booking. They had no idea they're talking to Ronnie himself. And I was with him one day when he picked up the phone and said, dress code, sir? Wear a tie. Nothing else, just a tie. But my favourite is talking about the austerity after the war, the post-war poverty. It was hard. And his mum used to buy his clothes at the Army and Navy stores in the kind of place. He said, we were very poor, but let me tell you, it wasn't much fun for a 9-year-old Jewish kid from the East End to have to go to school dressed in a Japanese admiral's uniform. That's the image of it, oops. Excuse me. One last bit about Ronnie's. Excuse me. That's it. Gary Husband, dear friend, anybody know Gary Husband, lovely drummer. We both realised that we're the only 2 people who've slept in the club. I slept there once because I was between flats, and Ronnie let me sleep in the little downstairs bar for a week. It was great. I used to sneak in the kitchen and steal food at night. But Gary has a much better story. He was doing a week there with his own band. And Gary is not only a great player, but he looks really snazzy. He used to have these terrific suits. He looked like he was going to an award ceremony. And one night he'd done the gig, he'd got people like Randy Brecker in his band, a terrific band. And he accidentally drank too much Jack Daniels. I don't know why, but he imbibed. And he went to the toilet and threw up and passed out. And that's all he knew over it for that night. He's found by the cleaner at 6 in the morning. He was horrified. Rings Pete King, who was the club boss, Ronnie's partner, the club boss, who who doesn't know who it is. He just knows that someone is in a state on the floor in the toilet. Comes over and says, "Oh, it's you!" Recognising Gary, the man who's playing his club, and bans him from the club for a long time. He's not allowed back in at all. Eventually, he's allowed back, but the doormen, they love their chance to have a bit of fun. And Gary would come to the club door, and they said to him, "Oh, good evening, Mr. Husband. I'm terribly sorry, we haven't got your usual suite ready for you." Now, hotels have always been a bit of a nightmare to the aspiring musician. There used to be digs, the actors had digs. The musicians acquired them. And they were run by these formidable landladies. Getting hot water after 7 in the morning was an achievement. But drummer Rod Quinn ordered breakfast one time, and this landlady brought out a portion of honey that was like that. And he's an Irish guy. He said, "I see you keep a bee." And she got a bowl of cornflakes that had about a layer like that in it. And he said to her, "Did you trip now? Did you trip now?" These are the kind of places that there's a mythology around them. Like you get into your room, open the window, and there's a seagull outside throwing bread in. Ray Fennick, that guitar player that you saw earlier, after a gig one night, we ended up in his room. And we were getting a bit noisy, we were having a few beers. And I said, "Look, think of the guests around us, let's calm down a bit." And Ray, in a wonderfully surreal moment, he rang reception to complain about the noise in his own room. There's a drummer I've worked with a lot, is a guy called Simon Phillips, who's a brilliant player. And he's the son of Sid Phillips, who was a band leader in the 50s. And Simon was in his band. Aged 11, he was the drummer in his dad's band. It's quite incredible. And he was telling me about his dad. His dad hated these digs, these awful hotels. So they used to camp. So a dance band would finish the show, drive to the edge of town, pitch all their tents, and go. They worked for them. Except for one night, it was a terrible fog. They got up the back door and couldn't see anything. They went off in their various cars. The baritone saxophone and the trombone player went off in a car ever so slowly. They found a patch of grass. So they got out, pitched the tent, and fell fast asleep. Woke up in the morning to the most awful noise of traffic. They opened the tent, looked out, and they're on a roundabout. Cliff Richards, in his early days of the Drifters, they were struggling as well. And people would say to him, "Where are you staying tonight?" He'd say, "Oh, at the Bedford." And he meant the Bedford van, who was the event sleeping for list. Last story about the Cliff Band. I played with them in 78, but the year before I joined, they toured Russia. And they checked at this hotel in Leningrad. And they suddenly realised there was something different about the check-in. And what it was, they were being checked in by the wrong name. That is not the second name, but by their first name. So Graham Jarvis was checked in as Mr. Graham. It came to the keyboard player, Cliff Hall. They went, "Ah, Mr. Cliff!" Got it completely wrong Cliff. They treat him like royalty. He's escorted up to the Yuri Gagarin suite, which has double, 4-poster beds, cows with swan deli and candelabra, a fridge full of vodkas. It was sumptuous. And he didn't say a word. He just accepted it, checked in. Then he rang up the bass player. He said, "Come and look at this room." Dave, I've forgotten his surname. He comes in and said, "Fuck me, what's this?" Because it's nothing like any room we normally live in or check into. I think let's ask Brian Bennett, the drummer. They asked Brian. Brian says, "Fuck me." And Brian said, "We better go and see what Cliff's room's like, Cliff Richard." So Brian went down the corridor, came back and said, Well, Cliff's happy with his room, except that the door bangs into the bed when you open it. So, and they didn't tell him for the rest. And of course, all that vodka, it became the party room. And to get into the party room after a gig, there was a secret knock. I'll do the knock here. Right, you approach the room outside. That gave you entrance to the party. And Jeff never found out. A bit about on the road. In the 50s, it was very different to how it later became, because for a start, there were no motorways, it was just A roads. And the bookers who booked these things were idiots. They booked a band from Penzance to Edinburgh to Coventry to Dundee, like this, never a logical route. So everybody just slept in the van or whatever. No iPods, no smartphone, none of that story. So you just told stories or looked out the window or sang or lit farts, as in some cases, argued, slept. But the smart guys like Brian Bennett, Big Jim Sullivan and Colin Green, they studied externally through the Berklee College of Music. And it was known as the University of the A1, the British Royal School of Music. It was hard. The theatres were dangerous. The Chiswick Bar had DC mains. And like Bruce Welch said of light shows, you had a choice. It was either on or off. Now my band, we struggled along. Oh, sorry, I missed a picture. That's Clem Fantini, 1958 at Stockton's railway station. So he's on the road with Billy Fury. And look at it, the glamour. Dear old Clem. This is Affinity, my band, with Linda. Now, we weren't best dressers, but we're trying. We got to a club up north somewhere. The promoter watched us going on stage. He said, he's had the horrors. He said, aren't you going to get changed? And we said, we have changed. This is it. And our singer, Linda, is a nice pick of her. She used to get all her clothes from little charity shops and things, but always chose well, so she looked good. Again, we had no money. We rehearsed, before the band started, we rehearsed in a bungalow in Brighton for the summer. And one night we were about to go home. She was looking through her wardrobe and what to wear. And I saw in the wardrobe 2 t-shirts and a pair of jeans. And she said, what dainty little number will I be wearing tonight? Good choice. The band spent 2 weeks in Stockholm in a club, the Golden Circle, and then drove back across Sweden to get the 36-hour ferry crossing across the North Sea. And Linda was given her wages to keep in her bag. Quite a bit of money. And she lost it on the ferry, which is pretty uncool. And we weren't impressed. Suddenly there was an announcement over the ship's tannoy, and in a voice sounding a bit like the Muppet Chef, it said, I should point out that her middle name is Gay, so her real name is Linda Gay Hoyle. And the tannoy said, would a member of Miss Gay Hoyle's party please come to the person? So she's now Linda Gay Hoyle. The band, we finished, after about 2.5 years, we had run its course, and our very last gig was at Bournemouth. And we played well, came off stage, there was a lot of applause, and we thought we'd better do an encore, final encore. Well, Linda was a bit emotional and she began being sick, this bucket, and gave me a look that said, I'm not going back on again. So we thought, well, we'd better go back, and we filed on stage. Nobody thought what we're going to say and how we're going to explain that the singer hadn't come back. And it fell to me, I don't know why, and I got nothing planned, but I kept saying to myself, I mustn't say she's being sick. I don't want anything like that, don't say to me stick in a bucket. So I improvised very badly. And I thought I'd been witty, and I said, terribly sorry, thank you ever so much. I'm sorry, Linda can't come back on. She's got the shits. My career as an announcer was curtailed. Now, this is the Clifford Band, the one I was in. Terry Britton, the guitar player in the middle, he wrote Devil Woman and also What's Love Got to Do With It for Tina Turner, so he did very well. But he on the floor in front of him was some foot pedals, guitar players who wah wah and fuzz and stuff. And one of the pedals he had was a new fuzz pedal from America, an American company called Electro Harmonics. And it was called a Big Muff. It's a great name, it's a great pedal, it sounded good. It looked like this. That's a Big Muff. And Cliff used to dance up and down and see this on the floor. It was all shiny. He thought, I must do something with this. He wanted to, in some way, superimpose him in this pedal for an album cover. Okay? So we're in a little room, back room somewhere, and he's all keen. He said, look, what I see is my face with a big muff on it. I've never seen a room empty so quick. We toured Australia, and some of the crew decided to go for a drive. And as you go inland, you meet the local animals, and they're bloody long journeys as well. And poor guys accidentally backed into a kangaroo that suddenly hopped across the path, knocked it out. I felt very sorry for it and went over and looked at it. But then their roadies, they got silly. They picked this thing up, but it's two arms around two of them, so they're taking photographs of this kangaroo like this. Then they got even sillier. One of the guys went off to the car, got a Cliff Richard bomber jacket, put it on the kangaroo, poked his arms through the sleeves, zipped it up. So he's got this silk Cliff jacket on, like this. And he woke up and hopped off. So, poor thing. Not even lazy Nixie, but Cliff Richard. Can I request some more fizzy water from somebody? Phil Palmer you saw earlier on, his Flying V he'd built. He toured with Straits as an extra guitar player. And he told me that one night they'd been touring in America and they crossed the border into Canada. And suddenly everything changes, all the food changes and smells different. And they came into the backstage area. Good man. My roadie. They could. Oh, okay, that's right. Next. They could smell bangers, and onions, and those bottles of Centimillion and HP sauce. It's different. And they tucked in. But Mark Knopfler and John Ilsey decided to eat not before the show but after. So enough sausages were saved and enough food was all set aside for them. They went on stage and did the show. They come off stage, there's not a hint of a sausage. Everything disappeared, the food had gone, the wine had gone. And they got really angry. And it became a bit of a good cop, bad cop. People being shoved against walls and, got very nasty. Wondering where these bloody sausages had gone. And they went to bed angry. And it only got solved the next day. In fact, the next night, the road crew helped out because, on a monitor you have the set list is written out down there so you can see what you're playing. And the road crew had written this: money for sausages, sausages and Juliet, sultans of sausages, private sausage and walk of sausage. It's got the guy smiling again. In 1980, I worked with Jeff Beck. Did an album with him, there and back. There, Getting Down with Jeff, that's in Yokohama. And we toured. And That was the bass rig I had built for me. I couldn't hear myself. Everything was so loud. And this building's ridiculous. It's got 4 12s at the top, 215, and 2 cinema holes at the bottom, driven by 1500 watts. And not only could I hear it, it was almost blowing me off stage. My clothes moved in the breeze. It was insane. Never again. We came on the English tour, their last nights were at Asbimodium, and Jeff was asked if he would go on Whistle Test, which was then hosted by Annie Nightingale. But he didn't want to know. Jeff likes staying at home, he can't be asked. So there's a guy called Judd Lander, who's a promotion man for CBS Records. He hatched a plan. And one morning, Jeff is in his house in Kent. It's a cold morning. He said he can suddenly hear bagpipes. He looks out the window, and there in his driveway is a guy naked playing bagpipes. It's ridiculous. Invites him in, this is Judd Lander, invites him in to get warm, have a coffee. And out of this, they hatched a plan that Jeff would agree to go on Whistle Test as long as Judd would play bagpipes naked. And this is what, you can get this on YouTube. You see that for about 10 seconds, he talking to Jeff. He's suddenly hear this ridiculous sound. And there he is. She said, "Is that a friend of yours?" He said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you." About a year later, I got, along with Simon Phillips, we got invited to go to play with Jeff at the Secret Policeman's Other Ball. It's an amnesty charity at Drury Lane. And there was no rehearsal, no time for rehearsal. You just had to stand in a dressing room and talk it through, just to say what you're going to do, the structure. And we did that. And I started talking to a guy in the doorway. I didn't know who he was. We had a nice chat. And then suddenly someone yelled up the corridor that we were on. There was a comedian doing his act behind the trumpet club. We sat up behind. So we sat up. I'm next to Simon, Jeff in front of me, and then the guy I'd been talking to has put a Strat on. He's standing right in front, left in front of me. I said to someone nearby, "Who's this?" And they said, "It's Eric Clapton." Oh, fuck. I had no idea. There he is. I've been talking to this man for 5 minutes. Because his face used to change. The beard came and went and whatever. And it got worse a year later. I did a Phil Collins tour and entered at Hammersmith. And in the bar around the back, there's a little narrow corridor that led to the bar. And I was talking to a friend who was squashed in, so people have to squeeze past me. And I wasn't taking notice of anybody who was talking to my friend. And suddenly this figure walked past and said my name. My showman put his hand down. I said, "Oh, thanks, man," and didn't recognise. He said, "It's Eric." And still didn't come in. He had to say his surname to me. I was so embarrassed. So, Phil Collins, this is the band at rehearsal in Shepperton. Got a lot of stuff there. And the live show looked like that. We had the Earth, Wind and Fire horn section, which is terrific. And we noticed that the horn guys had a penchant for carrot juice. They carried an industrial juicer with them in a big flight case. And every night you'd be in your room getting dressed. Next door you get in 3 gallons of carrot juice coming out. And you got used to the idea, that's fine. We reach, and this is the horn guys, where they're playing into their big Sennheiser mics. We reached the last gig of the tour, which is in Washington. It's Roadie's print night, it's the last night of any tour. And I'll tell you what happened, then you'll see. We did a song called I Don't Care Anymore, the act, which is a very somber, very darkly lit, very moody. And then it would fade to black, the horn guys would walk on in the darkness, be a count-in, brilliant white light, and they'd be standing into the second tune, I can't believe it's true, it's called. And that looked great, it worked fine. But on the last night, fade to black, fades to white, I'm starting to play it, and I can see that half the band is on the floor, pissing themselves in laughter. I've no idea why. So I suddenly realised the road crew had gone out during the afternoon and bought carrots that big, whittled them into the shape of a microphone and plugged the cable in. So these guys are playing into carrots. It's fantastic. It's lovely. And the crew had tampered with the set list as well. There was a song called "The Roof's Leaking." It said the roof's fucked. Coming in her hair tonight. I don't have hair anymore. Last bit in the studio. Got to show you this. Well, when I started playing bass guitar, again, I'd been a drummer, I was at college, I could only play with a pick. And I noticed that all the good guys were playing with their fingers. So I thought, I'd better learn this. But it hurt. It really hurts the fingertips. So I devised this, which is one string and a bit of a jack casing for a bridge and thing. The idea was I could play it whenever I liked and practice, get my fingers working, get the pad going. And it was good, it worked. I'd got this from the Affinity days. I got this big Swedish Army officer's coat, a big white thing, a big pocket here. And it fitted perfectly in the pocket, which meant I could walk along and practice. But somebody pointed out, all you could see was this. Throw off buses, you know, for And also, we discovered there's a thing called doubling in sessions. If you brought along if the guitar player, say, had an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar, that's called doubling, and he could charge his fee plus 25%. So just for bringing and playing it. If he brought a mandolin, same, doubling. And then they discovered that by switching a pedal on, or a fuzz box or something, you could call that doubling. So just by doing that, you're getting 25% more. Well, the bass players were having a hard time with this because we didn't have any proper pedals for this. There were until fretless came along, there were no other basses you could bring. So I was determined to join in. So I had this pedal made for me that had nothing in it, or a switch. And we called it a DFA pedal. You'll have to guess what that stands for. I used to say to guys, it's passing a bit of DFA. And I actually got a bit of money. The DFA pedals featured quite a few albums. A friend of mine recently made a Mark II. Here it is. And it's got is the same thing but with LEDs. So it's available for hire. I picture there's working with George Martin. Jeff Beck's album, The Blow by Blow, was recorded in 1975 with George Martin producing. Wonderful album. And George told me a story about it. Jeff is a very fastidious, very fussy player. And he'd do a solo on a track. It would be brilliant. But he'd take the tape home and listen to it and think, oh no, I can do better than this. So he'd call up George, and George was very patiently stand up at the studio again, stand up all the amps. Jeff would play us an incredible solo, take the tape away, and so on for several weeks. Then there's a long silence. And George gets the call again from Jeff. And George had this wonderful line to say to him. He said, I'm sorry, Jeff, it's in the shops. Now, how about this for a band? Cliff wanted to remake Move It. Do you remember Move It from '58? Probably the first British rock record in the merit. And it was 48 years on from that. And it was at Abbey Road Studio 2, in exactly the same spot where the original was made. And I was lucky to be there. Brian Bennett was on drums, and the guitar player was Brian May. Fantastic. But Brian May was late, he didn't turn up. And we're all wondering where he is. Finally, about an hour late, this rock god turns up, looking very tired, and his hair's a bit astray. And after a bit, he finally admits what the problem was. And he came out with an excuse, which is, I think, the best excuse I've ever heard for being late on a session. He said, "I'm sorry, lads. I've been up all night with Patrick Moore, proofreading a book co-written on the history of the universe." Oh, of course. Top that. It's better than a fan belt broke, isn't it? John Williams, the classical guitar player, actually lives right the corner from me. I was chatting to him one day. And he used to have a band called Sky, I don't know if you remember that band. The bass player was Henry Flowers, who lives down the street. Lovely player, mad as hell. And at one point, John was a bit confused by the, by the tonality of a certain bar. He put his guitar down, went over to where Herbie was sitting, and said, pointed to the music, said, "Herbie, well, I sent him one day. Is that a E flat 5 or is it E natural? What is it?" And Herbie looked up at him and said, "Mind your own fucking business." I wanted to make an album that had no drums on it, just as a challenge to make nice music with a good pulse, with great players. And we did it. It was a church in Oxford. And it was Ray Rosslon acoustic guitar, Simon Chambers on piano, and Frank Ricotti on vibraphone. It was very hard to do because you've got to keep terrific time in your head. And we did it in the classical way. We did lots of takes, which I then edited later, so there were no overdubs. And it came out as a solo album. It's one of which you can see out there. One of my tasks as producer was to go through every take to see what the best bits were. Now this took 2 weeks. This is just from 2 days' work. Meticulously going through everything to see what's happening. And there's some good stuff there. When you play a place like that, when you finish a piece of music, you mustn't make a noise, because the mics are so open, so you mustn't do a rustling sound. You mustn't breathe. Keep very still, don't squeak your chair, and then wait a bit longer because there's the reverb going on in the church. And on one of the takes, I could hear this at the end of a lovely ballad, just everything tailed away beautifully. And suddenly I heard this voice say, "If that stinks, you're dead." I've still no idea who said it or who said it. It's good. On Move It, that record, Cliff's record, the bass player was a guy called, double bass player, was a guy called Frank Clark. Lovely guy, very strong player. And he didn't suffer falls at all. One session, he was next to a guitar player who, for some reason, couldn't play a tacit. A tacit's when you and it's stationary. There's a, 4 beats gap. And you carry on. His guitar player kept playing one more note than was necessary, overshooting slightly. It was driving Frank crazy. Then at a tea break, Frank leans over the screen to the guitar player and chats and says, "It's not a guitar, son, that's a Gibson, isn't it?" And the guy said, Yeah. "Is that hardware gold plated, those tuning pegs?" The guy said, Yeah. Frank said, "It hasn't got disc brakes, has it?" I'm sure you know the program Countdown. Well, the theme was written by Howard Hawkshaw, people play it. And if you've seen this thing with this clock going round, and at the end it goes da-da-da-da-da-da, and then there's a big oing sound on a timpani, on a kettle drum. Well, that was Brian Bennett, and he'd taken the kettle drum round to Alan's studio, but couldn't get up the stairs, so they fixed it on the landing, with dangled the mic down the headphones. So they run the track. Brian's ready with his one thing and his pedal on the tin. Oing! At which point it woke up Alan's dog and they were sleeping in the corner. The dog shot over and began savaging Brian's neck. So through the table is oing! Dusty Springfield. You all know her. Well, before she died, so sadly, I got a call to play a one-off live TV show with a band backing from the Hippodrome. It was a Friday night thing, I think. And it's a great idea. It's lovely to play with that once. But it was a band that wore all, white tux, the whole gear, none of which I own. So I rang BBC Wardrobe and said, can you plan this for me? If I give you my measurements, can you have it always ready? And that's fine. So mercifully, I arrived an hour early because there was a catastrophe waiting for me. I got in the dressing room, put the jacket on, it was fantastic, beautiful. And the shirt and the tie. Got to the trousers, and the belt bit got to here. The crotch had only reached my knees. And they're like clown's trousers. So I pulled them up so they fitted here, by which time the belt line was here. I'm on live TV in half an hour. So no chance of changing it. I borrowed some braces, hitched them up to here, and then did this with the jacket. So, and it's on YouTube. You can see, standing just behind Dusty is a disaster, almost. It's awful trousers, but it's a cover. One last little thing. There's a friend of ours, Derek Wasworth, an arranger and writer. He wrote the music for Space in 1999. Lovely man. I was doing a session for him at CTS Wembley Studios, and he's in the control room and pushes the button and talks to me through the headphones. And he said, Mo, you see that E major at bar 71? And I looked through thinking there's got a pencil out, thinking there's a change. I said, yeah. And he said, it's nice, isn't it? And I'll leave you there. So take a break. See you later. Yeah.